Hola estudiantes, ¿cómo están? Hoy es lunes, el 17 de julio, y estamos terminando poco a poco. We're headed into the final stretch. You want to finish strong. Today is the 17th. We've got this week and part of next week to finish up everything that we need to do. So this week you are continuing to work on Chapter 4. You'll take the Lesson 4 chapter exam, and you'll start Chapter 5, which will be the last chapter we'll look at in this term. And on the 27th, which is the absolute last day to turn things in by midnight, you've got the second discussion blog, and this is also the ultimate due date for your trip to the Spanish Conversation Center. So let's take a look at the second discussion blog. Y cuenta lo que pasó. Tell what happened. So follow the instructions carefully and post your original blog and responses by the following deadline. So your original post is due on the 24th. So you have several days to do it at midnight. And your responses, very important, responses to two of your colleagues a couple of days later by midnight on the 27th. So again, as always, 27 is what we call the hard deadline. That's the deadline that shows up in the system. Cuenta lo que pasó. In Lección 3, you watch the video, Adiós Mamá, in which a young man falls victim to a fraud perpetrated by a motherly grifter. There's a lot of that going around these days. Have you or someone you know ever been the victim of a similar crime? In your post, tell what happened. Write entirely in Spanish and use correctly several examples of verbs in the preterite and the imperfect. So we want you to use the past tense. Include an embedded image that relates somehow to your experience. If you can't think of something fraudulent that happened to you or someone you know, feel free to make one up. I don't care. Lift it from TV. Lift it from Netflix. I don't care. But it should be a minimum of 10 complete sentences in Spanish. So here we go. This is the question that you're addressing. ¿Has sido alguna vez víctima de un crimen o fraude como el que viste en el video Adiós Mamá? Cuenta lo que pasó. Have you ever been a victim of crime or fraud such as the one that you saw in the video Adiós Mamá? Tell what happened. So here we have an embedded image, which is very interesting. We see somebody reaching out from the internet trying to steal your money. So I really like that image. Oh, look, people are already posting, and it looks like they've been victims, whether it was in Harris Teeter or online or maybe with a streaming service that you have. I mean, it's happening all over the place. So these are tend to be very, very interesting. So feel free to have fun with it. And again, please be aware of your deadlines. So now we're on VHL. This is the 17th, and you can see the amount of time that's required to spend on the various homeworks. And you're finishing Chapter 4. Lesson test is on the 19th. It says 30 minutes, but as always, you have a full hour. And then you're getting into Chapter 5. A couple of days for Chapter 5. The 26th is like a stop day, a reading day, and then the 27th is the last day, and we've already seen that that's the last day for the Conversation Center, and that's the deadline for the second discussion blog, and that's also the last day for the lesson test. So again, 30 minutes, but you know that you have a whole hour. So here we are, Lección 4, La Salud y el Bienestar. And you've been looking at vocabulary. It has to do with health and your well-being. Los médicos, los hospitales, las enfermedades, todo eso. And you've been looking at structures such as the subjunctive in noun clauses, as well as commands, and also por versus para. So don't forget that it's often a good idea to go to study Spanish to get some supplemental practice or perhaps an alternative explanation for some of these grammar points. And I'm just going to use por y para as an example. And so it's 54. And I don't want any ads. And perhaps a slightly different perspective. You'll wind up at the same place as you do in the textbook, but maybe they explain it slightly differently, better examples. So it's never a bad idea to check out studyspanish.com. And so here, of course, they explain the main differences between por y para, and differences, if there are any, between English and Spanish. And here they break it down as a series of different rules. Rules for por, rules for para, and then set phrases. And it's really quite good. And then, of course, when you're ready, you can take the basic quiz just to test yourself, and they'll grade you. And then you can bump it to the mini test, all right? And then you could even do an oral, which is always fun.
Translate the following sentences.
Just try it.
I
So, llegué tarde por el tráfico. So the reason why, the underlying reason why I'm late is the tough traffic. So you would use por in that situation. So if you go by your rules, you think, oh, okay, this is the object of a mission. He's going on an errand. He's going to go fetch a pencil. In that situation, again, it's always por. Estudiante fue por el lápiz. So let's look at the lesson exam coming up, chapter 4, and it is available. And you've got a time limit of an hour. Remember, once you open it, you can't stop. You got to keep going. And let's get oriented. So let's take a look. So, no pertenece, the one that doesn't belong. So, indica la palabra que no pertenece al grupo. You want to choose the one that doesn't fit with the others. So you're finding a connection between agotado, sano, resfriado, and mareado. So the one that doesn't go is sano, which means healthy, because agotado, you're sick, you're feeling crummy, you're exhausted. Resfriado, you've got a cold. And mareado, you're seasick, you're nauseous. So all these have to do with feeling bad, feeling sick, except sano, which is the opposite. So that's the one that doesn't belong. And number 2, more vocabulary. Another cold, otro resfriado. Completa el texto con la palabra adecuada de la lista. So the one that makes the most sense, you've got to drop down. And context, as always, is very important. Hoy me desperté con mucha. Okay, watch your context clues, because whatever you have, whatever you choose, it's got to agree in gender and number with mucha. Mucha is singular and it's feminine. So whatever your choice is, it's got to be something that's feminine and singular. So, so you can throw a lot of these out immediately. And it looks like the only one that makes sense is fiebre, which is a fever. A little bit hard maybe to tell that that's feminine because it ends with an E, but it's la fiebre. So it's definitely feminine. And that makes sense. You know, it's something you could tell your mom, a little kid, you wake up, oh, Mom, I'm feeling so hot. So, hoy me desperté con mucha fiebre. And 3, ¿qué necesitan? More vocabulary. Indica qué necesita cada una de estas personas. Utiliza cada opción una sola vez. So what do these different people need? And you can only use each option one time. So what's the situation? 1, me caí y me rompí la pierna. I fell and I broke my leg. So, oh, your buddy tells you, oh. So if you look at the drop down, necesitas hacer una dieta, start a diet, vacunarte, vaccinate yourself? No. Ir a la sala de emergencia. So you need to go to the emergency room. So that's the one, the only one that makes sense. So pay attention to your context. 4, completar. Completa las oraciones con la forma adecuada del presente del subjuntivo. So you're using the subjunctive in every case. Just pay attention to the subject, right? So, hoy volveré a explicarle a la abuela cómo tomar el medicamento. So, I'll explain to Granny once again how to take her medication. Ojalá, I hope. So, ojalá always calls for subjunctive, but you already know that you need subjunctive, and they're giving you the verb entender, and you want to say, oh, I hope that she understands it this time. So you're still talking about the abuela, so you conjugate the verb entender for the abuela using the present subjunctive. So it would be, ojalá que esta vez lo entienda bien. And 5 oraciones. Completa las oraciones con el infinitivo, el indicativo, el subjuntivo. And I think you just use these one time, or actually, they're giving you a choice. So infinitive, subjunctive, or indicative. So if you look at the context, es mejor que, you know that it's got to be subjunctive because the person speaking is expressing their opinion. They're trying to influence their interlocutor's behavior. So it's better that you stop smoking now. That way your flu will get a lot better. So I'm trying to get you to do something. So that's expressed in Spanish with the subjunctive. So the only possibility is dejes, which is the subjunctive form. Takes the opposite vowel. Instead of a, it uses e in the ending. Es mejor que dejes de fumar. So pay attention to the syntax and pay attention to the context. 6. A moverse. Move it, move it, move it. So completa el texto con mandatos formales. So here you're using formal commands, and you only have 2 choices, either usted, singular, or ustedes, plural. You guys. So this is like an ad that you'd hear on the radio or TV, and it's pasas muchas horas frente a la computadora. You spend a lot of hours in front of the computer. Tiene dolor de espalda, you have backache. Si es así, if that's the situation, no sentado todo el día. So something seated all day in your big overstuffed chair. So the only one that works would be quedarse, which is to remain. And they're saying don't remain seated all day in your chair. You know, move it, move it, move it. So así, no se quede sentado. It's a negative command for usted, singular, and it's no se quede sentado. Right? So be careful, again, and definitely for positive and negative. And so pequeñas pausas. So you want to make sure that you make time for brief breaks. And the only verb that remotely works here would be hacer. So do small breaks every hour. And so, okay, I'm still addressing usted, so it would be haga pequeñas pausas. So, 7 opiniones contrarias. Tu amiga y tú piensan de forma distinta. Contradice a tu amiga siguiendo el modelo. So, your friend says hi, you say la. You say black, she says white. So, in every case, you're giving the opposite. So, looking at the modelo, she says, vete a la cama temprano. Go to bed early. You want to give the opposite. So you say, don't go to bed early. You keep it at the same level of formality, which in this case is tú, and it's singular, so tú. No te vayas a la cama temprano. So vete y no te vayas. You're giving the opposite. Let's try another one. Lávate las manos con mucho jabón. So wash your hands. And now you want to come up and say, don't wash your hands. Right? No te laves las manos. So you always want to give the opposite. Finally, 8, this is the final part, last activity. You've got por versus para. Me llamo Estela y trabajo una empresa de videojuegos. Okay, so the context is that my name is Estela and I work for a big video games company. So when you work for somebody in the sense of relationship of employer-employee, it's always para. So, me llamo Estela y trabajo para una empresa de videojuegos. Mi hermano Eric trabaja para el Estado. My brother Eric works for the state. Yo trabajo para UNCW. So when it comes to employment, always use para. So, I think we're going to leave it there. Vamos a dejarlo ahí. Y si necesitan algo, pues se pongan en contacto conmigo, me avisan. Si no, feliz estudio y suerte con todo. Estaremos en contacto pues muy pronto. Hasta luego.